What if prayer wasn't about asking, but about becoming? What if awareness wasn't just a passive state, but the actual force that shapes the world around you? And what if everything you've ever wanted, love, health, abundance, peace, wasn't something to chase, but something already planted inside you, simply waiting for your recognition? This is the reality David Goddard lives in and teaches. Long before manifesting became a trending topic, and long before spirituality became content, Goddard was diving deep into what it truly means to be a creator. He didn't follow dogma or tradition. He followed experience. He followed presence. And above all, he followed the feeling that there had to be more than just wishing and hoping. There had to be a way to align with what's already yours. He found that way through prayer and awareness. But not the kind of prayer most people know. Not the begging, not the repeating of words like magic spells, and not the awareness that simply means paying attention. For Goddard, these words, prayer and awareness, are codes. When understood correctly, they don't just offer inspiration. They offer access. Access to what you want. Access to who you are. Access to reality's underlying structure. In his work, prayer becomes a shift in identity. You don't pray to receive, you pray to embody. You assume the posture, the breath, the thoughts, the emotions of someone who already has what you desire. You stop speaking from separation and start feeling from unity. You collapse the distance between yourself and your dream. You don't ask for it, you become it. This is where most people miss the mark. They pray as if God or the universe is somewhere else, far away, requiring petitions or bargains. But what David teaches is radical in its simplicity. You are the source, not metaphorically, literally. Your state of consciousness determines your reality. So, when you change your state, when you truly feel from the end, the world begins to reflect it. This inner transformation doesn't happen through effort. It happens through permission. You stop fighting, you stop pushing, you stop trying to make things happen, and instead you step into the quiet confidence that it's already done. Goddard's own journey is filled with moments that demonstrate this. Times when nothing on the outside was working, yet he chose to rest in the awareness that the solution was already present. He recalls financial struggles that dissolved after he imagined himself in ease. He remembers relationships healing after he spent time feeling what it would be like to be understood, not just hoping for it, but knowing it as real. For him, awareness isn't just about what you notice. It's about where you live internally. And most people, he says, are living in fear without realizing it. They might say positive words. They might visualize, but underneath, they're vibrating in lack, doubt, unworthiness. Awareness means watching those patterns arise, not to fight them, but to choose again, to shift, not by force, but by resonance. You don't fight fear with logic, you out-vibrate it. You do that by moving into a different state. This is where prayer becomes powerful, not as performance, but as portal. Goddard says, don't pray for peace. Be the person who lives in peace. Don't pray for love. Be the version of you who is loved. He often shares that the most potent form of prayer is quiet imagination. Before sleep, he invites people to lie down and bring to mind the scene that would imply their wish is fulfilled, not to force it, but to feel it, to sink into it like it's the most natural thing in the world. This isn't escapism. This is creation. The body doesn't know the difference between a deeply imagined event and a real one. The nervous system calibrates to what you consistently feel. So if you spend 10 minutes every day being the version of you who already has it, the body starts expecting it. And if the body expects it, your actions, decisions, and even subconscious behaviors start to align with it. Eventually, the outside must catch up. Goddard teaches that we live in a holographic universe where outer events mirror inner states. So the question isn't, how do I get what I want? It's, who am I being right now? And does that match what I claim to desire? If not, he doesn't suggest trying harder. He suggests relaxing deeper. letting go of the external obsession and returning to the inner frequency. This frequency is a feeling, a vibration, a knowing. You can't fake it, you can't force it, but you can choose it. And when you do, life becomes softer, quieter, but also more alive. The noise of doubt fades. The need to prove dissolves. You stop living in reaction and start living from choice. You begin to feel as if life is happening through you, not to you. This doesn't mean challenges disappear, but it means you meet them differently. You don't crumble under delay. You don't panic in uncertainty. You remember who you are. You return to the feeling of wholeness, and from there, solutions emerge. Goddard doesn't promise instant results, but he promises inner shift. And once that shift locks in, outer results are inevitable. This is why he teaches prayer and awareness together. Prayer changes your state. Awareness sustains it. Prayer puts you in the new reality. Awareness keeps you there long enough for the old one to dissolve. He calls this living from the end. And once you start doing it, you realize how much of your life was being lived from lack, how much of your thought was rooted in not having, and how often your energy contradicted your words. But with this new model, everything aligns. You think from fulfillment, you speak from wholeness, you act from peace, and the world moves to match it. People notice. They say you've changed. You feel lighter, freer, more powerful. Not because of what you gained, but because of what you stopped carrying. Fear, doubt, pressure. And all of it started with a prayer, not to the sky, but to the self. Not a whisper of hope, but a declaration of truth. There is a kind of sacred discipline in learning to feel from the end, and David Goddard invites people to treat this as a daily spiritual practice. You wake up in the morning not as a seeker, but as someone who already possesses what was once longed for. This internal shift, subtle yet seismic, changes the tone of your day. Decisions arise from certainty, not craving. Your posture changes. You notice different things. Your conversations shift. It's as though the future has already visited you, and you are simply walking its path in reverse, remembering what is already yours. This is the magic of assuming the fulfilled desire, of embodying the prayer rather than performing it. David shares that when he began working with this principle in earnest, results were not immediate in the physical sense, but his inner world changed instantly. That inner shift, he says, is the true success. We don't wait for the world to change before we feel different. We feel differently, and the world follows, he often says. He describes how financial challenges, health fluctuations, even relationships that once felt stuck began to unravel and transform, not because he did something outwardly dramatic, but because he stayed with the inner feeling of peace and resolution until it was real to him. And once it became real inside, reality adjusted. One of the most profound things David teaches is that awareness itself carries intelligence. If you simply place your attention on the reality you desire, without stress, without neediness, it begins to draw itself toward you. Why? Because in the field of consciousness, what you hold in awareness is what you are feeding. Just as the sun causes a seed to grow, your conscious focus causes ideas, realities, and potentials to become tangible. This is why distraction and fragmented attention are so spiritually costly. They dilute the energy that could be magnetizing your life toward coherence. David's prayer life is not rooted in repetition or dogma. In fact, it rarely involves words. Instead, it is a quality of attention, a state of silent alignment. He might sit with eyes closed, breathe deeply, and step into a memory that hasn't happened yet. He might visualize walking through a home he hasn't bought, or feel the presence of a healed body while sitting still. His prayer is not to ask the universe to bring something. It is to become the vibration that matches it. He shares that the most difficult part of this practice is not generating the feeling, it's sustaining it in the face of appearances. The external world often seems to contradict what we imagine. A bill arrives, a call goes unanswered. An old fear resurfaces. But this is when the true work begins. Will you abandon the inner state because the outer hasn't changed yet? Or will you hold the vibration steady, knowing the delay is not denial? David likens this to tuning a radio. If you want to hear a certain song, you don't complain that it's not playing. You adjust the frequency. If the signal is static, you don't curse the airwaves. You refine your receiver. This is what prayer through awareness becomes, a continual retuning to the frequency of your fulfilled life. He recounts stories of clients and students who practice this. One woman imagined walking hand in hand with her partner, even though she'd been single for years. She practiced the feeling of warmth, shared joy, quiet evenings together. And one day, she met someone who embodied what she'd felt. Not because she was desperate, but because she'd already become the version of herself who knew how to receive that love. Another man visualized closing business deals with calm and ease. For weeks, nothing happened, but he kept showing up, inwardly rehearsing the success. Then 3 offers arrived at once. These are not coincidences, David insists. They are direct results of disciplined imagination and emotional alignment. But what about doubt? What about those moments when the mind fights back? David doesn't pretend these don't happen. In fact, he welcomes them. Doubt, he says, is not an enemy. It's a sign that something deeper is surfacing to be healed. When doubt arises, instead of pushing it away, he invites it to speak. He asks it, "What are you afraid will happen if this does come true? What pain are you protecting me from?" Often, he finds that doubt isn't about failure. It's about unfamiliarity. The nervous system resists what it hasn't known before. And so, part of the work becomes helping the body feel safe in the new frequency. This is where awareness becomes healing. By observing the doubt without believing it, you reclaim your power. You no longer identify with the voice of fear. You witness it, breathe through it, and return to the state of fulfillment. Prayer and awareness, then, are not just tools for manifestation. They are the path to sovereignty. When you master your inner state, no circumstance has authority over your peace. You might still experience challenges, but you move through them from a center that is unshakable. And in that centeredness, transformation happens more easily. Because you're not resisting life, you're leading it from the inside out. David often says that the real miracle is not getting what you want. The real miracle is realizing that you already are what you thought you needed. That is where freedom begins, not in the outer result, but in the inner awakening. He points out that most spiritual teachings talk about surrender as letting go of control. But he reframes it. Surrender is not giving up, it's giving over to the reality you choose to embody. You surrender to the state, not the circumstance. You stop fighting for the old story and start resting in the new one. This is why his work resonates so deeply. It's not about effort, it's about resonance. You don't fight your way into abundance. You settle into its vibration. You don't force love to arrive. You become love and let it recognize itself. It sounds simple, but it's not always easy, especially in a world that rewards hustle, struggle, and proof. David invites us to go deeper, to live from the invisible and trust that the visible will reflect it in time. And when it does, it will feel strangely familiar, because you've already lived it inside. Over time, people who walk this path begin to notice a subtle yet profound transformation, not just in what they experience, but in who they become. There's a quiet sovereignty that begins to emerge. The outer world becomes less threatening. The pressure to control begins to fade. Instead of obsessing over outcomes, you begin to care more about your state. Not because outcomes no longer matter, but because you realize that they are byproducts of your inner alignment. David often reminds people, reality doesn't come from striving, it comes from resonance. If you're striving, you're signaling that what you want is not here. But when you rest in the felt experience of already done, you radiate certainty. That certainty is magnetic. It draws to you exactly what matches it. He speaks of the law of assumption not as a trick, but as a mirror. The world reflects not what you say, but what you feel to be true. And you can always know what you really believe by what your life is reflecting. If something continues to show up that you don't like, it's not punishment. It's an invitation to look deeper. What am I still believing? What am I still identifying with? One of the most liberating realizations in his teaching is that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them. Thoughts come and go, like clouds. But you are the sky. You can observe. You can choose. You can shift. From this space, prayer evolves again. It's no longer something you do to change life. It's something you do to come home to your essence. It becomes a remembering, a restoration, not a request, but a reunion with what's already yours. David describes moments where this kind of prayer feels like pure stillness, not words, not imagery, just sitting in the knowing that all is well, that the answer is within, and that alignment is the only goal. In those moments, reality softens. The body relaxes, the nervous system resets, and the energy field expands. He has seen healings happen here. Insights drop in. Synchronicities appear without effort. This is not theory for him. It's lived truth. And it's available to anyone willing to pause, to feel, and to assume the identity of wholeness. Awareness, then, becomes not just a tool for transformation, but a lifestyle. You begin to notice when you leave your center. You catch yourself when fear creeps in. You become intimate with your emotional patterns, not to fix them, but to meet them with compassion. When you're rooted in awareness, even the hard days become holy. You're not thrown by circumstances, you're guided by your inner state, and the more consistently you return to that state, the more solid it becomes. Eventually, it becomes who you are. You no longer try to become peaceful. You are peace. You no longer try to get love. You are love. You no longer try to attract abundance. You carry the frequency of enough. From this place, action is no longer frantic. It's intuitive. You don't need to chase opportunities. You follow nudges. You trust timing. You move when it's aligned. You rest when it's not. And somehow, everything gets done. Doors open, people show up. The path lights up, often at the very last moment, but always right on time. David emphasizes that this doesn't mean sitting around doing nothing. It means doing from being, not acting from fear, but from truth, not forcing outcomes, but following inspiration. And when action arises from this inner stillness, it carries power. It moves mountains, not because you push harder, but because the universe moves with you. In his teaching, one phrase comes up again and again: let it be simple. He warns against overcomplicating spirituality. You don't need more rituals, you need more remembrance. You don't need the perfect technique, you need the willingness to feel. Sometimes the most powerful prayer is just sitting down, closing your eyes, and whispering, "Thank you," as if what you want has already arrived. Not to manipulate reality, but because you know that gratitude is the signature of fulfillment. Other times, prayer is silence. It's walking barefoot in the grass and feeling supported. It's drinking water slowly and acknowledging that life flows through you. It's waking up in the morning and choosing to feel safe before checking the news. These are not small things. These are profound acts of spiritual alignment. David says that awareness is a muscle. The more you train it, the stronger it becomes. At first, you forget and fall back into old patterns. But every time you return to awareness, you deepen the groove. You create a new baseline, and eventually, awareness becomes your home frequency. This is when life becomes graceful. Not because it's always easy, but because you're no longer fighting it. You're dancing with it. This dance is not passive. It's powerful. It's co-creation. You lead, then listen. You feel, then act. You create space, then receive. And all of it flows from the decision to no longer operate from lack. When you stop identifying with the small self, the one who is always trying to get somewhere, and instead identify with the higher self, the one who knows it's already done, you transcend the chase. You stop hustling for what you already have in essence, and that's when life starts responding to you differently. This is the quiet revolution that David Goddard embodies. He doesn't shout. He doesn't sell you formulas. He invites you inward, into the sanctuary of your own consciousness, where prayer is not performance, but presence, where awareness is not passive, but profoundly creative. He reminds you that you're not here to figure it all out. You're here to remember, to feel, to trust, to return again and again, and eventually that returning becomes so consistent, so steady that you stop returning and start living there. That's the goal, to live as awareness, to move from prayer, not toward it, to feel now what you used to chase, and to let that feeling build a life that looks like peace, breathes like love, and vibrates like truth. You don't have to wait. You don't have to fight. You don't have to prove. You already are. And if you forget, sit still. Feel again and pray, not to be heard, but to be home.